You know, when we think of the Regency era, our minds immediately go to glittering ballrooms, dashing heroes, right? But what if I told you that all that glamour was really just a paper-thin veneer, hiding something much, much darker? Today, we're going to peel back that curtain. We're going to look at the brutal reality that actually powered the whole spectacle.
So, to get started, let's do a little thought experiment. I want you to imagine you're stepping into a grand London ballroom. What hits your nose? Lavender water? The scent of fresh flowers? Well, not exactly. To get to the truth, we need to think about what was just outside those elegant windows.
The reality of a Regency ball was, frankly, an overwhelming assault on the senses. The dominant smells? They weren't perfume. They were industrial and biological. Just outside, open sewers were flowing right into the Thames. The air was choked with thick coal smoke. The streets were literally paved with horse manure. And inside, those beautiful, pale faces were often caked in toxic lead makeup. That was the real scent of the Regency.
And that stark contrast brings us to our first major point, the shocking geography of London itself. This wasn't just one city, it was a tale of two Londons, two completely different worlds, living practically on top of each other in a way that was, well, it was stunning and, frankly, pretty dangerous.
Just look at this. On one side, you have the incredible luxury of a Mayfair club. On the other, the absolute squalor of the St. Giles Rookery. And here's the mind-blowing part. A gentleman could walk between these two worlds in less than 15 minutes. Think about that. He could leave a night of high-stakes gambling and, a few blocks later, find himself surrounded by families crammed into what were described as foul and noxious cellars. These weren't two separate places. They were completely intertwined, and the wealth of one was built directly on the suffering of the other.
And this is where it gets really grim. Regency London was in the middle of a full-blown environmental catastrophe. The River Thames, which was the main source of drinking water for a lot of people, was also the main sewer. Cesspits leaked into the groundwater constantly, and the air, observers called it a hellish and dismal cloud of soot that caused constant sickness. This wasn't just a problem for the poor either. The poisoned water and toxic air, they affected everyone.
Okay, so we've seen the filth and the inequality right there in London. But what was fueling this glittering world of Mayfair? Where did all that cash actually come from? Well, the answer wasn't in Britain. The engine of the Regency economy was colonial, and its fuel was exploitation on a massive global scale.
Let's start with this number, 200,000. What do you think that is? The size of the entire British Army? Nope. That was the size of the private army of the East India Company. That's right, a corporation with its own army, twice the size of the actual British military. This gave them the power to basically act like their own country, conquering and controlling huge parts of the world.
And that unchecked power had absolutely devastating consequences. 10 million. That's the estimated number of people who died in the Bengal famine of 1770. Historians directly link this catastrophe to the East India Company's ruthless land tax policies. While the company's profits shot through the roof, a third of the population of Bengal starved to death.
So how did all this wealth get back to Britain? Well, a big part of it was through something we can call the toxic exchange. It's a pretty wild cycle. The East India Company grew opium in India, smuggled it illegally into China, and then used the silver they got from fueling an addiction crisis to buy tea for the British market. An entire national obsession, the afternoon tea, was funded by a state-sponsored international drug ring.
And this table really connects all the dots. The obscene taxes collected in Bengal, they bought country estates and seats in parliament for company men. The sugar that sweetened all those desserts and tea, produced by enslaved people in the West Indies. And that whole opium for tea trade fueled the very ritual of afternoon tea itself. Almost every luxury you'd find in a London ballroom was a direct product of misery somewhere else in the world.
All right, let's bring the story back home. With all this colonial money flooding into the country, the stakes for marriage became higher than ever. For the upper classes, marriage wasn't about love or romance, no way. It was a cold, hard economic transaction designed specifically to consolidate all that new wealth and power.
And the price of entry into this marriage market was just staggering. A typical dowry for an aristocratic family was around £10,000. Now, to put that in perspective, in modern terms, that's like having between 10 and 18 million pounds. A dowry for the absolute top-tier elite could be worth over 50 million pounds today. This wasn't a wedding gift, it was a massive transfer of capital.
And for the woman at the center of this whole deal, Her future was sealed by a legal doctrine called coverture. The second a woman got married, her entire legal identity was just gone. It was covered by her husband's. He legally owned her property, her money, and any money she might earn in the future. A good marriage meant you were secure. A bad one, it was a legal and financial prison with almost no way out. So, we've looked at the dirty city, the brutal colonial machine, and the ruthless marriage market. Now for our final layer, the personal, physical cost of trying to live up to the era's ideals, specifically, the ideal of beauty.
You've seen it in the paintings, right? The most desirable look of the Regency was this picture of health, a pale, almost translucent porcelain skin. It was a huge status symbol. It shouted to the world that you didn't have to work outside in the sun. It signaled purity, wealth, and delicacy.
But what if that healthy glow wasn't a sign of health at all? What if it was actually a mask, hiding a slow, creeping process of self-poisoning?
To get that pale complexion, women used something called Venetian ceruse. It was a skin whitener made from white lead, a potent neurotoxin. To get rosy lips, they used compounds made from mercury. And the go-to medicine for everything from acne to syphilis, something called colonial, which was also made of mercury. The pursuit of beauty was literally a slow, toxic process that led to hair loss, rotting teeth, muscle paralysis, and even insanity.
And this really brings us to the core idea of the whole era, captured perfectly in this quote. The Regency Glow was the perfect illusion, a beautiful surface, whether it was on a woman's face or across an entire empire, that was maintained by the slow internal poisoning of the people who made it possible.
Which leaves us with one final, unavoidable question. From the filth in London's streets, to the famines in India, to the lead powder on a lady's face, the glamour of the Regency was built on a foundation of hidden misery. So you have to ask, if a so-called golden age requires us to ignore that much suffering, was it ever truly golden at all?